Chapter 12. The circulation of prana in our bodies. The preceding study of our life forces has taught the reader what that atmosphere of psychic ether is in which, as even modern science has at last recognized, we dwell. We are now to study the circulation of this ether, the terrestrial prana, as it enters the body and passes from one vital center to another, working with such marvelous intelligence and system that its component corpuscles and ions may well be said to be endowed with thought. The philosophy of the Tattvic Law of the universe is beautiful in its simplicity when fully understood, and the student grasps the subtle relations of cause and effect and holds in his mind's eye a soul-uplifting picture of the whole cosmos. But this cannot be gained without personal effort. For the law presents at the outset some facts so opposed to the accepted order of things that it seems impossible to explain the theory in words so convincingly simple as to be comprehended by all readers. It is the truth of being which the Tattvic Law discloses. But to understand these truths and reap the full benefit of the knowledge, you must weigh them with unprejudiced minds. Think for a moment how profoundly the authority of the senses must have been shaken when the first microscope revealed to man the heretofore invisible world, in touch with him everywhere, teeming with undreamed-of activities, governed by the same laws as the visible realm, and similar but infinitely finer forces than those he already knew and had weighed and classified. When the microscope opened the first gate into the invisible kingdom which surrounds us, it disclosed also the shortcomings, or limitations, of the physical senses, and, with many other marvelous instruments since invented which penetrate and weigh and measure the unseen, the experience should warn us never to deny any new thing, because our senses have hitherto failed to cognize it. Then, too, when difficulties present themselves, it is defrauding self to seek outside help before trying to solve them by real thinking, such mental exercise as will make the brain more pliable and receptive. You can draw no knowledge from any printed book, from written word whatsoever, unless with receptive mind you think the matter over and make it your own. Much study and the reading of many books become a delusion and a snare unless time for thought be given and the mind assimilates and digests the facts. Only thus can we invite winged thoughts of inspiration and encourage the development of the higher self. Moreover, if you would reap full advantage from the study, a state of mind in sympathy with the subject and matter under discussion is absolutely necessary. Antipathy and antagonism, the spirit of denial, close the receptive channels because blinding judgment and obscuring the intellect. An intense desire for knowledge of a particular kind, especially for light on the path, opens the way and attracts the vibrations that lead you almost unerringly to your goal. Unfortunately, most people face a novel proposition with all the antagonism of previously accepted theories arrayed against it. But you must now cast any prejudices you may have behind you and prepare with inquiring mind to understand the only logical and scientific explanation which has ever been conceived of that most wonderful mechanism, the human body. It is a conception which makes natural, brings into the realm of reality what has heretofore been considered supernatural, when not dismissed contemptuously as mere superstition, and lifts the veil from the mysterious relations which connect the human being with the whole solar system, and make the physical instrument a sensitive harp played upon by myriads of vibrating waves. Tantrik philosophy studies and analyzes the circulation of prana in the human body from the moment that its two currents, positive and negative, establish their northern and southern centers of influence in the embryo. The northern, or positive, focus becoming the brain center, and the southern, or negative, the heart. The interaction of these two currents working from center to center, back and forth in rhythm with the great breath of the universe, guided, directed, and restrained by the Tattvic vibrations emanating from every center of force in the starry firmament, gradually builds up the marvelous nervous and vascular systems connecting these two centers of life, and ramifying thence throughout the human entity till the living temple is made ready for the indwelling soul. Thus, as related to each other, the nervous system is positive and the blood system negative. But the diurnal rotation of our earth affects our bodies as it is itself affected, and gives rise to other currents which divide these systems into east and west, or positive and negative halves. The right side of the body corresponds to the east, and is under positive influence, and the left side to the west, and is negatively affected. Then the correlative influence of all these currents develops in each center, the brain and the heart, a further division into lower and upper chambers. In the northern center we know the upper, or positive, division as the cerebrum, always recognized in physiology as the dominant part of the brain, and the lower, or negative, as the cerebellum. In the heart, we can identify the auricles as the negative, and the ventricles as the positive divisions. Notice that in both centers, the positive divisions are nearest the poles of these centers. Thus, the lower chambers of the southern center are positive, and the upper part of the brain, that is, the hemispheres of the cerebrum. Put yourself in imagination within your egg-shaped aura, and this will be clear to you. The eastern and western currents of prana make for themselves two main channels called respectively Pingala, the positive, and Ida, the negative, which run down the length of the spine, forming the trunks of the great sympathetic system. The spinal canal is the sushumna, the conjunction of the two currents where the prana changes from side to side. There is also a cardiac sushumna midway between the right and left lobes of the heart. To all these conduits of force, nerves, arteries, and veins, the tantrists give the name Nandi, and for the sake of its simplicity we will retain it. The three nadis above mentioned are the most important in the body, being the great reservoirs and conduits of life force. Radiating from both the Ida and the Pingala are 50 principal nadis, and these branch into hundreds and other hundreds till 10,100 branch nadis are reckoned. And through the ramification of these into thousands of twigs, the nadis of the third degree become so minute as to be visible only under the microscope, and the total number is reckoned as 727,210,201 nadis. Wherever this vast network of nerves spreads throughout the body, there are blood vessels running side by side proceeding from the nadis of the heart. Thus, you see, the real force of life dwells in the nervous system, which receives the positive solar current of prana, while the blood vessels receive through the nerves the negative lunar current. The one, therefore, represents the sun, and the other the moon. But these two phases of life-sustaining matter are merely different conditions or states of the same substance, prana, the solar matter, and its manifestations in the body are an exact expression of the terrestrial prana as is that of its solar source. I shall also use the tantric term chakra, signifying a disc or circle, in describing the pairs of sensory and motor nerves branching from the spinal cord. These 31 chakras of the spine are brought into existence by the 31 sunrises in a zodiacal sign, and the tantrists recognize a like number of chakras in the heart which correspond with the sunsets. Animating and inspiring the 1,000-petalled lotus of the brain are 12 pair of nerves which correspond with the signs of the zodiac in their positive phase. And, likewise, from the 4-petalled lotus of the heart proceed 12 end disc conduits of blood which reflect the negative aspects of the zodiacal signs. These can be identified in any good illustration of the heart. Thus the microcosm mirrors in itself the macrocosm, and every nandi and chakra therein is connected with the greater sphere by invisible lines of a power and influence that human intellect has never yet weighed nor measured. Although there have come down through the ages hints of these mysterious relations which would not be silenced, modern thought has brushed them aside contemptuously as rank superstition. Ere long all the textbooks will have to be rewritten. Blavatsky says, "The heart is king, the most important organ in the body of man." And she further states that esoterically it is the seven-leaved lotus, the cave of Buddhi, with its 7 compartments and corresponding brains. That is, states of spiritual consciousness. The Hindu Trimurti, Trinity, corresponds in the world of matter with fire, sun, water, and earth, and is symbolized by the lotus, which, rooted in the earth, grows up through the water to expand in the sun-warmed air into leaf and bud and blossom. A most sacred symbol to the Hindu, this transition from root to sun-kissed lily expressed to him the evolution of the soul through its earthly physical vehicle to spiritual consciousness. Here, again, we have proof of the aptness of the symbology. For these descriptions of both heart and brain are corroborated by clairvoyant sight, which sees, surrounding both these centers, countless radiations of exquisite opalescent prismatic colors. They circle and return, outlining in very fact the many-petalled sacred lily of the Orient. For striking illustration of this, see Babbitt's Principles of Light and Color. The sympathetic cords, the Pingala and the Ida, consist of chains of ganglia which are centers of Tattvic influence, the Padmas or lotuses of the Tantras. These Tattvic centers are of 5 sorts, taking the form of the prevalent Tattva. Thus the Prithvi centers are quadrangular, the Apas, semilunar, Tejas, triangular, Vayu, spherical, and Akasha, circular, and Tattvic permutations form composite ganglia. It is of interest to record here that 5 distinct types of cells in the spinal ganglia of our friend, the dog, are known to anatomists, every one of which could probably be identified with the Tattvic force therein manifested. Although the record of the human neurons is incomplete, it has been noticed that the spherical germinal cells, partly for reasons at present not clear, later assume, in different regions, very different shapes. The significance of this change of form, however, seems never to have been surmised by the anatomists. In Standard Dictionary, under the word perineurium, an interesting illustration can be seen of a cross-section of a nerve. There are 5 coils of wire-like fibers grouped together in the general sheath. They vary greatly in size, and every coil has its own insulating sheath, preserving to every tattva its inviolate line, though all run over the same wire, or nerve. Presumably, the sizes of the coils vary according to the dominance of the tatiyas. The padmas of the sympathetic cord are closely connected with all the 31 chakras of the spine. Those of the Pingala are, of course, positively electrified, and they owe allegiance to the brain. And those of the Ida are negative and owe allegiance to the heart. The movement of prana through the nervous system corresponds with the course of the sun through the signs of the zodiac and with terrestrial rotation. As the sun passes from one sign to another, the prana moves to the corresponding nadis of the brain. At sunrise, the rays of this localized prana descend every day to the spinal chakra on the Pingala side corresponding with the position of the sun in the zodiacal sign. Thus, every chakra in turn, day by day, is the microcosmic correspondence with the ecliptical prana of the macrocosm, and from it the prana streams along the nerves of the right side, gradually entering the arteries and veins. Always, under normal conditions, prana is stronger till noon in the nerve than in the blood chakras. At midday these 2 great life-distributing systems of the body are equally balanced, and this perfect equilibrium fits the individual for the fullest expression of his physical and mental powers. He is in the enjoyment of the noonday of his strength. It is most unscientific and a brutal imposition upon the stomach to load it up at this time, when the day's labor is but half done, with a hearty meal of foods difficult to digest. It is a flagrant waste of both strength and food. Only a light luncheon of easily digested foods should be taken. Especially for all sedentary workers, this rule should be made a hard and fast one. From noon on, the blood is the great absorber, and at sunset the solar purdna has passed entirely into the NDDLS of the blood. The impact of these positive vibrations has beaten upon the tattvic chords of the various sensuous and active organs until they are weary and have lost the power of sympathetic response to external stimuli. Therefore, the fatigue and lassitude commonly felt as night approaches are perfectly normal, and are nature's warning signals to halt. The hour for rest has come, when the positive current gains more than ordinary strength, as when willpower flogs an exhausted mind or body to continued effort. The senses are so overstimulated that they cease to respond to external excitants, and prolonged abuse causes their breakdown. After sundown, the heart, the negative southern center, gathers the prana to itself, whence it spreads gradually into the left side nadis of the blood, and returns from them into the nerves. At midnight, the two systems are again equalized in strength. But at sunrise, the prana has passed into the nerves and is ready for the daily circuit, descending to the spinal chakra, succeeding the one through which it streamed the previous day. The moon, moving 12 times faster than the sun, is the source of minor lunar currents of prana that move correspondingly faster than the solar current whose diurnal circuit we have just traced. These movements correspond with the movements of the sun and moon through the zodiacal signs, and their interaction is the immediate cause of the periodical changes of breath. Thus, while the sun's rays are reflected in one chakra, those or the moon pass through 12 odd chakras, and the lunar current of prana streams from the spine to the heart in a fraction less than an hour, 58 minutes, 4 seconds, and returns in the same time, while it is passing from the spine to the right, that is, from the northern center to the east. The breath flows out of the right nostril and, as the Shivagama describes it, the right side of the body is the full side. When the prana enters the cardiac canal, the heart's sushumna, the breath, for a few seconds, is imperceptible in the nostrils. As it leaves the heart from the left, that is, moving to the west to return to the brain, the breath flows from the left nostril. And thus, hour by hour, or a duration of 2.5 chots, 1 gari equals 24 minutes. The solar and lunar currents alternate, and thus they would rotate, forever and a day, in agreement with the unchanging laws of the universe, but for the disturbing factors of human will and emotions. But the freedom which has wrought so much evil is simply a power misused. It is even more powerful for good. The periodicity of special wave vibrations which stamps upon every mind its bias, imparting its individuality, is established at the moment of birth by the pranic current prevalent at the time. But never forget that we have the ability to overcome unfavorable vibrations, and the overcoming develops latent power as nothing else can. Self-conquest is the greatest achievement, and the self-conquest won by the light of the Tattvic Law is a process of uplifting development, a growth of soul power, not of humiliating self-abasement. Chapter 13. The Manifestations of Prana. What we know as the manifestations of prana are the periodic changes of its center of activity from one vital function to another in unvarying progression, apparently regulated in the order of manifestation by the changes in the flow of the tattvas. For these manifestations of prana are of course manifestations of various tattvic activities. Concerning this the Upanishad explains, as the paramount power appoints its servants, telling them, rule such and such villages, so does the prana. It puts its different manifestations, its elemental servants, in different places, and they follow in the order in which the flow of the tattvas succeed one another. By the flow being meant the predominance of one tattva more than the others. It is not to be understood, for example, when Vayu is said to be flowing, that Vayu is the only tattva present in the pranic current. But it is in greater proportion 4 atoms to 1 each of the other 4 in order that its centers can be renewed, whether waking or sleeping, while life animates the physical entity. These changes succeed one another ceaselessly and methodically. According to the Shivagama, the flow of the tattvas is gari by gari, about 24 minutes, one after the other, and the current of prana is active in all the centers of the prevalent tattva at the same time. This, however, does not agree with the teaching of the modern gurus and learned pundits of East India, but I believe I can reconcile the two. The Shivagama is known too clear in describing these changes, and the Upanishads are entirely indefinite on the subject. Therefore, it is not surprising that some students have confounded the tattvic changes, or the manifestations of prana in tattvic centers, with the changes of the pranic currents, which are much longer, and this has led to some confusion and diversity of opinion as to the changes of breath. The succession of the tattvas is not in the exact order of their evolution, and it varies also according to the part of the body in which the current of prana is at the time active. Thus, while it is in the back part of the body on the right side, the tattvas change from Vayu to Tejas, Prithvi, and Apas. And when the life current passes into the front part of the right side, they change from Apas through Prithvi and Tejas back to Vayu. The changes on the left side are exactly reversed, for negative action is a reflection of the positive, receiving its impressions as does a mirror that of the object before it. If we could keep this always in mind, it would explain many puzzling things. As Akasha flows between every 2 tattvas and is active in the Sushumna, which intervenes between the changes of pranal currents, the time of its flow is broken into shorter intervals. And, therefore, the description gari by gari could not apply to it. It is my belief that the meaning of the Shivagama has been misunderstood, and that the description therein of the flow of the tattvas applies to their changes in the solar and terrestrial currents of prana, and not at all to those in the human physique. Just as the planets are distinguished one from another by the predominance of a ruling tattva, so also is every species of earth life thus differentiated. And the lower the grade of life, the simpler the structure and, consequently, the vibration and the color. This is proved in the auras of minerals, which show only one color, and of the flora and fauna, which display more and more complex colors as they ascend in the scale of life, as you might conjecture from its life under the ground. In the busy ant, Prithvi is the dominant tattva, and the reason the fly goes into hiding or persistently attacks the human being and all warm-blooded creatures when cold winds blow and on raw, damp days, is that Tejas is its life element. I have found that the most obstinate nuisance will cease his persecutions on such days if a pitcher of hot water be placed nearby. He will hug it as long as warmth lingers. In the birds of the air, Vayu predominates over Prithvi, while in the quadruped who clings to the earth with 4 feet, this is exactly reversed. I have frequently given emphasis to the fact that upon man is placed the responsibility of choosing for himself what shall be the dominant tattvic activities of his being, and that upon his choice depends not alone his own weal and woe, but the comfort, happiness, and well-being of all whose lives are connected with him. Therefore, knowing as you do now the terrestrial influences of the various tattvas, it must certainly appeal to you as more logical that some of them should have a greater normal flow than others. And this is exactly the teaching at the present time of the East Indian Gurus. By this method, their order is as given above, but Vayu is said to flow 8 minutes, Tejas 12 minutes, Prithvi 20 minutes, Apas, 16 minutes, and Akasha, only 4, as this totals 60 minutes. The rational conclusion is that the exact period is a fraction less, and that there is one complete change of the tattvas during the flow of each current of prana. Now, if you remember that 5 charts are about equal to 2 hours, you will understand that by the Shivagama reckoning we are confronted with the puzzling statement that there is only one complete change of the tattvas during the flow of the 2 currents. That is during a positive period when the breath is in the right lung and the currents are flowing from the northern to the southern center, and a negative one when the breath is in the left lung and the direction is reversed, the prana flowing from the heart, or southern center, northward on the left side. Yet the statement is also made in the Shivagama that in the left as well as in the right there is the 5-fold rise of the tattvas. That the Tattvic changes in the world current are gari by gari is my conviction. With regard to the 2 currents of prana, it is significant that the period of their flow exactly corresponds with a 12th of the moon's eccentric diurnal orbit, during which period there is a marked change in her elongation, or angular distance from the sun, and this change in the wave vibrations is reflected in the breath. The Tantrists believed the lunar current to be most powerful during the rise of Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, Capricornus, and Pisces, and the solar current to be dominant when Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius are in the ascendant. To understand this clearly, we must grasp the conception of the wheel within wheels, the ever-present positive and negative forces in every division of every activity down to the infinitesimal molecule. Thus, though the lunar current is negative to the solar, it is itself compounded of positive and negative atoms and has its positive aspect. In no other way can we reconcile the flow of the lunar current southward on the right, the positive, side to the heart, during which time the breath flows from the positive nostril. Therefore, in its effects and action, or movement, it is like the solar current, for it is positively electrified. We are simply to understand that the course of the current through the body is influenced by the direction given to the moon's rays from its position in the heavens. But always the ray lunar current, or negative phase of prana, is the cooler state of life matter, which is only the shade of prana, the original state. It has the qualities of Amrita, the giver of eternal life, and also, in the left Nandi, the appearance of the breath is that of the Amrita, nectar. It is the great nourisher of the world. On the first lunar day, that is, the first day of the bright fortnight, or moonlight nights, the manifestations of prana 143 lunar current, which is then the stronger, is said to flow at the rising of the sun, and during the dark fortnight the solar current comes in first, the currents alternating one after the other as previously described. In spite of this normal order, however, Tantrik philosophy teaches that it confers groups of good qualities to cause the negative breath to flow at sunrise and the positive breath at sundown. Any electrician should understand the rationale of this, for it puts the body in a receptive condition towards the terrestrial prana, which is at the maximum of its positive phase at sunrise. If it is the normal condition for the lunar current to come in first during the bright fortnight, we need seek no further reason for its being considered the most fortunate half of the month, especially for women, who are the negative half of humanity. The most important of the manifestations of prana are 5 in number, though the Hindu proneness to the ultimate analysis rests not till it enumerates 10 of these forces, or so-called Vayas. But as the 5 minor ones are but modifications of the others, signs as it were of their activities, we will confine our examination to those governing organic functions. The first is the act of breathing, and as this function is the key to the changes of the life current, it bears the same name and is identified as prana, being Says Rama Prasad, that manifestation of the life coil which draws atmospheric air from without into the system. Vayu is the prevalent tattva, and the right lung is the sayat of its positive phase, and the left of the negative. The pulmonary circulation of blood in the upper chakra, the cavity of the chest, is positive to that in the lower chakra, below the diaphragm, but also arterial blood in both chakras, or systems of circulation, is positive to the negative veins. The capillaries are the sushumna of the vascular system. Thus, again, you find the wheel within wheel. The second manifestation of prana is samana, which governs the processes of digestion and assimilation, carrying the nutrient juices where needed. Tejas is the ruling tattva, and the stomach and navel the seats of its positive phase, while the negative phase is active in the duodenum. Apana, the third manifestation, governs the excretory functions, in which Prithvi predominates. The positive phase working in the long intestine, and the negative in the kidneys, as Apana is said to throw from inside, out of the system, things which are not needed there. It is reasonable to conclude that the function of Prithvi in both skin and lungs is excretory, and that perspiration is also a manifestation of Apana. Vyana, the fourth manifestation, is the sayat of apas, and is present all over the body, being that force which, during life, keeps all parts in perfect shape and resists breaking down and disintegration. This preponderance of apas, 5/6 of the human body is water, can be traced throughout the physical structure, its seats of influence being more clearly defined anatomically than those of any other tattva. The semi-lunar valves in arteries and veins are among these. The fifth manifestation is udana, the sayat of akasha. It is the power which inclines the life forces back to the centers northern or southern, and is regnant therefore in the spine and heart, and also in the throat. A lump in the throat, when the breath catches and almost goes, after a quick run, proclaims the presence of udana, and this manifestation is dangerous. It is evidence of the excess of one current, and if it passes to a certain delicate line beyond the ordinary limit, the opposite current fails to react. Prana remains in the sushumna, and death results. These are the moments when life hangs by a thread, so delicate is the balance. To stimulate the opposite current to flow is the need at this critical moment, and probably in most cases it is the positive current which has done the mischief. Whole books of the Upanishads are devoted to poetical descriptions of these manifestations of prana, imagination reveling in depicting their power. Prana is usually described as declaring itself fivefold through enfolding the various elements, or tattvas, in these several manifestations. There are said to be 5 gates to the heart, for the devas, or senses. Remember that every sense corresponds to a special tattva which stimulates its activity, and the heart is the ruler of the sensuous and active organs. The heart receives impressions from the positive prana, and it is the nature of the heart's reflection of these upon which human actions and the work of the world depend. The eastern gate is prana, manifested in upbreathing. Apana, the western gate, is described as down-breathing, and the deity that exists in the earth, in modern phraseology, gravity, is there to support man's apana, ever attracting its activities downwards. Samana, the northern gate, is described as on-breathing, because it impels the grosser materials of food to the apana, and conveys the finer and more subtle nutriment to the limbs. Vyana is the southern gate, and, pervading the blood nadis, is recognized as back-breathing. Udana is called the upper gate, and distinguished as out-breathing, being most perceptible in the throat. Now, this upward impulse has its normal beneficent phase, encouraging growth, lightness and agility, and it is evil only when the currents are unbalanced. For the Tattvic Law of harmony requires that these two vital creative forces be equally active, but alternately dominate one another. As these manifestations change from one to another, the state of sus-humand intervenes. Therefore, the rays of sus-humand extend all over the body midway between the positive and negative nadis, another medium by which the prana passes back and forth from the positive to the negative parts of the body and vice versa. The rule holds good to all eternity that like seeks like. You must think in harmony with the purest vibrations of the external world, if you would reap the benefit of your kinship with all good and all power in the universe. Understand well and clearly this fact. The very ability to think at all implies the freedom to use the power beneficently instead of harmfully, to change your thoughts from one thing to another as easily as you do your garments. Nothing is impossible to the soul-directed thought. Failure is through want of faith, of fixedness of purpose and aim. Success is in direct proportion to the unswerving trust of our belief. It is we who fail, never the law. Our very failures testify to that.